Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to bring you this webinar today, The Ultimate Polar Expedition. We're here to talk about our Antarctica sailing expedition, and we're here with our guide, Colby Brockfist. Hailing originally from New England, Colby has an appetite for wild places. With a degree in environmental sciences, his passion for guiding lies in connecting people to wilderness and providing educational context for his guests to create a rewarding travel experience. Colby has a special affinity for mountain and polar realms and has guided trips in destinations as diverse as Churchill, Yosemite, Antarctica, Patagonia, Yellowstone, Namibia, and the Everglades. He has been featured on National Geographic Weekend Radio and has worked on and off camera for various travel-related television productions. He is also a published travel and nature photographer and occasional essayist. Colby lives just minutes outside Yosemite National Park, where he enjoys hiking, mountain biking, rock and ice climbing, birding, and photography in his free time. He has backpacked some of the USA's most famous long-distance wilderness routes, including the Appalachian and John Muir Trails. And today he's broadcasting from our office in Boulder, Colorado. Colby, over to you.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for participating today. I'm excited to talk to you about Antarctica. I actually just got back a couple of weeks ago from this season. And it was an extremely exciting one. Nat has given me sort of the reins to the slideshow today. I don't really have any particular agenda or anything. I'm not going to talk about things like cabin berths and what you're going to be eating, but I'm going to focus a lot on just the things that you might see down there. And in particular, I want to share like some of the special experiences that really highlight what this trip is really all about. And if there's something to take home from the webinar today, I want you all to leave with the impression, I hope I can give you the impression when you leave that this trip really is different. There's really something special about this versus other Antarctica trips, in particular in contrast with their, your typical cruise ship style trip. And the reason for that is because we're on a small yacht. Right? It's a small group. We're very nimble in terms of our own personal interactions and the preferences of the group. And then we're also nimble because we have our own small private yacht. We can take advantage of the weather. We can take advantage of wildlife situations, and we can, be really sort of work outside of all the typical schedules that define those cruise ship type of trips. So what happens is that we end up with a really meaningful experience. We're not just down here seeing things, but we really end up becoming connected to Antarctica. And so I like to make a little bit of a joke, if you all bear with me, that we're not just going on an Antarctica trip, but we're sort of the anarchists of the Antarctic when we're down there. Like, we're really going rogue in our little yacht, and we're going to go and we're going to just sort of do whatever else we want to do. We're going to avoid everybody else when we're down there, and we're going to create opportunities for ourselves and take advantage of the things that are presenting themselves to us during our own time down there, not just what might occur down there, and we'll try to make it happen, right? So that's sort of the theme. I'd like to set that up a little bit more for you. And talk about how we execute that. So this trip is very unique. We accomplish sort of these big lofty goals, this different experience through a few different methods. One of them, of course, is we have exclusive permits through the National Science Foundation that have been issued to not have exclusively. That allows us to spend a lot more time on land, in particular the nights camping. And we can camp not just on the islands of the peninsula, but we can camp on the continent. And I'll talk a little bit more later on in the slideshow about what our camping actually looks like and what that means. But the take-home message is what that does is it allows us time, a lot of time on land, away from the ship, away from just floating in the ocean, to where we can really connect to the environment, connect to the land. We can enjoy the stillness. We're not worried about zodiacs coming in and out, dropping off other groups. We're just out there on our own. And that has implications for wildlife as well. That'll come during those times. You can get to see sunset, drink some wine when you're out there on the land. The other thing is that it's an intimate experience, right? We're on a very small boat. It's a yacht, a motor sailing yacht, 76 foot long. There's 3 crew, 1 guide, and 7 guests, right? So there's just 11 of us complete on this boat. So that makes for a nice intimate setting. It's a very personal thing. Dinners are really fun. You get to know your fellow travelers. We all get to share our own stories and personalities with each other. You're not just another number, walking up and down the gangplank on these boats. The other thing is that we really strive to create meaningful adventure time. So again, we don't have any schedules. It's one thing that really defines this trip is that even when you show up, even when you look now on the itinerary, you'll see something to the effect of days 3 through 12 exploring the Antarctic, right? Like that is about as much of a schedule as we have. But what that really translates to is by not having a schedule, we can make our own in situ. And if things are happening out there, if we have seals swimming around our zodiacs or our kayaks and we want to spend more time with them, we do. We don't have to get back to the boat so another group can try to come out and do it before the cruise ship has to move on to the next destination. This manifested on one of the trips this year, and I'll talk in a few minutes about this big whale day that we had. And we had been planning on going kayaking, and it ended up that we had this 2-hour encounter with humpback whales, and we took advantage of that. We created that time. It ended up being one of the highlights of the entire season. And then when we got back onto the boat, onto the Australis, then we got to decide what we wanted to do, and we all voted that we still wanted to do some kayaking. Heck, the days are really long down there. So we had an early dinner. Our private chef on board made an early dinner for us. We still got in the kayaks and spent about 2 hours kayaking, and we got done at about 10 at night in the daylight. So things like that are possible on our little yacht that aren't possible on big cruise ships. There's also a lot of active options, right? We do a lot of walking. Sometimes there might be more rigorous hiking that we can do depending on which destinations we decide to go. There's plenty of kayaking and of course walking around when we're out there on our camping adventures. So a lot of active options, and that really sets apart this trip from some of the cruise ships as well. And of course, all these things add up to better wildlife encounters, and really, I would say, superior wildlife encounters, right? The wildlife down there is really incredible. It is really a better experience than you'll find in a lot of other destinations because the wildlife is so accessible. And this trip really, really kicks it up a notch because, again, we could spend that meaningful time there. And as we all know, as NatHab travelers, the more time you can spend with animals, wildlife out there, the more time you have to see all their special things as they settle in and get used to you being in their environment. So this is a slide just to get everybody excited about some of the things that we do down there. So again, just to sum up the major points of this trip, we have the ability to go kayaking together. We get to sail and cruise on sightseeing excursions on the boat itself. Just moving from place to place and being in a landscape is wonderful. We get to camp out on the continent. Up to 4 nights through National Science Foundation permits, and then we do a lot of zodiac cruising as well. And each one of these, as you'll see throughout the slideshow here, presents its own unique options or sort of sets up unique scenarios for enjoying wildlife and the ice-filled environment that's down there. It's all about creating opportunities and being flexible, and we have the ability at any given time to take advantage of any one of these 4 modes of exploring down there. So Antarctica, of course, is a big place. Just like you don't come to North America and see the entire thing, you might go to New Jersey. So when we're in Antarctica, we go to the Antarctic Peninsula, and the picture of the entire continent on the left has that little arrow that shows you where the peninsula is. And then the blue picture on the right, that shows the area that we have access to on the yacht. And every itinerary is different, every trip is different. Again, we go different places depending on the weather, the wildlife, what the ice is doing. The beginning of the season is much different than the end of the season in terms of ice and then in turn wildlife. And so we take advantage of the ice conditions and the weather as well as the interests of the 7 participants that are on the trip in order to decide exactly where on the peninsula we're going to go. Typically, we're on the western side of the peninsula. In some rare occasions, again, usually that has to do with ice or weather, we may go onto the eastern side of the peninsula. Most all the good stuff is on the west wildlife-wise. So that's where we're actually heading. The other thing I wanted to mention when we're down here, and again, this is something you could talk more in depth with your adventure specialist, but I know it's a question that always comes up, is, boy, Antarctica, you're talking all about ice. I see these icebergs. It sure looks cold down there. And I did want to talk about the temperature briefly. Like on the peninsula here, the temperatures are much more mild than what you would find inland, right? You hear about McMurdo Station and Vostok Station and all that at the South Pole. Not only do they have the high, cold winds, high-speed cold winds, but just the temperatures themselves are colder because they're at a much higher elevation. On the peninsula, we are at sea level when we're cruising around, and now we're surrounded by mountains that are up to 8,000 feet in height, so it's very dramatic. But we're not actually up high in the mountain environment. We do have an ocean influence, and so it's very temperate, really. It's very manageable in the summertime in Antarctica on the peninsula. And what that means really in terms of temperatures is that the temperatures, they fluctuate right around freezing. So for those that have been up to Churchill to see the polar bears, you'll find it actually more likely quite a bit warmer in Antarctica in the summertime than when you went to visit the polar bears in the autumn in Churchill. So it's very comfortable. Past that, of course, we have gear lists to help you pack. We also have Mustang suits, which are our type of survival suit that are insulated. I can't tell everyone how they're going to feel and exactly how to dress. I tend to be dressed a lot lighter than some of the other folks. If you tend to run cold, you might want to wear your Mustang suits when we're out on deck and the wind's blowing by. Other people might just have a light down jacket on. But overall, it's very comfortable and it's very easy to layer up in order to be enjoying your experience when you're there. So, without further ado, I just wanted to share some of the exciting things that could happen down there. The first thing I want to talk about is what we ended up calling, dully perhaps, our Big Whale Day. This was one of the highlights of the whole season, and it even had a lot of folks here in the office talking about it. The guests were really excited to show their pictures of the day. And I think this is really just a great example of how we can really take advantage of the situation down there. And so this all occurred in a place called the Lash Strait, which is a big strait that runs down the western side of the Antarctic Peninsula, and it has the continent on the eastern side, and it has a whole chain, an archipelago of islands on the western side. And so the strait, it's very deep, and it, of course, channels water that comes through, and with the water comes krill. It's the basis of the food chain down there in the Antarctic. And the humpback whales are a baleen whale. They strain the water for this krill, and that's the mainstay of their food, and that's really why they're down in Antarctica, is specifically for feeding from this wonderful food source. And as we were coming into the strait, we saw a big Norwegian cruise ship on the other side. It held about 200 people, and they were staying in the real deep water on the other side of the strait. And I'm sure some of those folks from the deck could look over and they could see some of the whales breaching. But for us in our little boat on the other side of the strait and not having any place to go, place to check in, so because those cruise ships have to all sort of avoid each other and stay away from each other, or we're just in our own little world regardless, we were able to get right over to where these whales were. And for about 2 hours, we got to watch all these humpback whales. They came under our boat. You could watch up from the crow's nest as they came under. We had guests that ended up getting sprayed as the whales were breathing and left their jackets all smelling like whale breath when they were done. And you can see all the different behaviors on this slide now. of course, the flukes coming up. We had bubble net feeding. They were lunge feeding. Some whales were just playing, having fun, and breaching. And we also saw a lot of calves. At one point, the captain and I, we were trying to count the whales, and at one given time, with us looking in different directions, we counted 70 whales around us, and it was more likely that there were actually more whales than that were under the water at the time that we were counting. Really exceptional. It was fun for me. I was up in the crow's nest for quite a bit of it, calling out 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, wherever the whales were going to come, because I could see them coming up before the guests could, that were down on the main deck, and so they could go over to the part of the bow where they were going to get their good pictures. So you'd see the whales over here, and I'd call out 11 o'clock, and everybody would turn the other way. And for about 2 hours, we had all this action occurring. It was really, really exciting. The other thing that happened is about halfway through, we had a big pod of orca come through as well. So not only do we have all those humpbacks, but the orcas were there as well. These are type B orcas. So there's 4 different types that you'll find down in the Antarctic, and they are all slightly different. They're essentially a subspecies, and these type B orcas, they feed primarily on seals. They're specialists on seals, where they'll knock seals off of the ice, and we got to see some of that action as well. So it was a really exciting time. And this is not a great picture, I'll admit that, but just look what was happening here at the same time. We're here, we have 70 whales, we had about 20 orcas, and then here we have icebergs with crab-eater seals. There's gentoo penguins that had all come out because those orcas had come by, and everybody was trying to get up onto the ice, and at the same time all those humpbacks were over there. And while all this was going on, that poor Norwegian cruise ship was just cruising right by, and we got to be right there in the thick of the humpback whales all by ourselves. It was really, really a special moment. After about 2 hours, this calmed down, and we sailed for about another 20 minutes and turned a corner into a protected bay called Wilhelmina Bay. And when we got to Wilhelmina Bay, we found that the choppy seas of the Gear Lash had given way to protected waters of Wilhelmina, and the seas were just glassy as glassy could be, and we ran into more humpbacks. And so in this case, we grabbed our Zodiacs, we dropped them into the water, and we Zodiaced out so we could be actually out there on the water, on the flat water with the whales. And this is something that, being on this small yacht, the Australis, this is where it really shines. To be able to do things like this and just call the audible as things are happening and get out there. And you can see, you know, the second half of the group, we had 2 Zodiacs out. I mean, they're maybe 20 feet away from these feeding whales. It was really special. We ended up spending about another 45 minutes in the water with 2 other groups of orcas, this being one, humpbacks. So just really, really incredible, really, really, you know, special type of experiences where you really want to be able to take advantage of the situations as they're occurring and make the most of them. And we have the ability to do that on the Australis. So really, really fun. Another thing I wanted to tell you about, another highlight I think of the season, is what we were calling the whaling Weddells. The Weddell seals are these seals. The Weddell seals have 2 things that are a little bit special about them compared to the other seals. One is they're the only seal that will regularly, and they prefer to haul out on the land fast ice. So all the ice that's connected to the islands and connected to the continent, that's where they prefer to be. The other thing that's special about them is that they're not very bothered by human presence at all. And of course, we have the IATO agreement down there for all the tour operators, and you know, we very specifically follow all the wildlife watching regulations that are the same for all of the seals. But the Weddell seals really allow you to sort of maximize the boundary that you can approach them to, right? So it's 5 meters for all the seals, but you know, take things like crab-eater seals. When they're out on the sea ice, like you're lucky to get maybe within a couple hundred feet of them, where these Weddell seals, you can get right up to them about 30 feet away, and they might look over at you, but they're not bothered at all, and so you can really spend some time with them. And when you get to spend time with any type of animal, of course, that's when you really start to see all the fun behaviors come out. And so we were, in this case, we're on our Zodiacs, and we stopped a little ways out, turned off the motor, let the seals get comfortable, and then we used our oars to position ourselves a little bit more closely to the edge of the sea ice. And we hung out there for about an hour in total, and partway through that we had the seals do two things. One is they started getting in the water. So in this image you can see two seals, one on the ice, and if you look down in the lower left, you'll see that there's a seal head popping out of the water. And that's one of a few seals that we had that ended up coming into the water to come check us out, and then they went off to feed a little later on. But this whole scene we ended up calling the wailing Weddells, because the other thing that the seals do is they vocalize with this really fun sing-songy, trilling sort of wailing sort of sound, and they'll do it above, you know, I guess on the ice, right? And they'll also do it under the ocean, right? And they can hear each other, so they can talk to each other, even as some are in the water and some are on the ice. They can talk to each other. And so at one point we had several seals that were up on the ice singing to the ones that were in the water after they had left. And we were just sitting there in silence. At that point, no one was even taking pictures. We were all just, you know, had our seats, and some were even, you know, sitting on the floor of the Zodiac, just lounging with their eyes closed, and we were just listening to the seals on this just really calm, mild, sunny day, and it was just really wonderful. And again, these are the things that you have to be able to make time for. You need meaningful time in order to make things happen. You can't just scream in, see the seals, and expect to see them do these things. So being able to have time and take advantage of these opportunities and really just sort of dig into the environment, to the landscape, and that makes everybody comfortable and everybody happy to do really fun things for you when you're there. And of course the photography is wonderful in these situations as well. Some of these pictures that I'm showing you now are mine, but I was mostly driving the Zodiacs around, or I was up in the crow's nest calling the shots. This is one where I did have a couple minutes to actually compose a shot once we got settled in, but generally us guides were positioning the Zodiacs for the guests, so you can all get good photos when you're there. This was another one of the seals that were in the water when we were there. And it takes a lot for animals to get comfortable where they'll want to approach this closely, right? This was taken with a 70mm lens right off the side of the Zodiac. Just a little bit about photography as well. I'm sure there's some photographers out there. Again, the IATO agreement, they allow us to get within about 30 feet of the animals. Animals can approach you. That's nice to know too, particularly the penguins. They'll come closer, or like those seals and the Zodiacs. If they decide to come to you when you're stationary, that's okay. But otherwise, we can go and we can walk out. In instances like this with these Weddell seals that like the land-fast ice, here we are at low tide, and we found some seals that were relaxing during the middle of the day when they're not hunting. We were taking pictures again, and so again here we had, for the photographers, we had about 30 minutes or so to take pictures of these seals, and people got some great shots. This is one of mine of those seals that we walked over to at low tide. So some really fun opportunities that we can create that are, you know, just not part of the usual cookie cutter experience. This is from the second trip that I guided this year. Again, getting, you know, a mother and young of any wildlife species to relax enough to where, you know, they're just paying attention to each other and not you. It takes some time, and we really have the ability to create that time. See these guys and really appreciate them. These are Chinstrap penguins, if you're interested. These are Chinstrap penguins. And I'll move things along a little faster now, again, just to sort of share my excitement of some of the things that have happened over the course of the season. Here's an example of a Gen 2 penguin coming and walking over to one of our travelers this year. She was just out there relaxing. You can't see, there's some seals just off of the screen that she was actually watching. And in the meantime, the Gen 2 penguin came from the colony that sits just above her on the rocks and walked right over to check her out and see what she was doing. And that's really not that uncommon at the penguin colonies. If you're just willing to be patient and sit there and be there for an hour or two, just these really wonderful little things end up happening. You never know what they're going to be. And of course, it's not all about wildlife in Antarctica, right? You're on, you know, the ice continent, and just the landscape itself is incredible. Over 98% of Antarctica is covered by ice, and it dominates the landscape. You know, the continent itself, but you also have all the floating icebergs and glaciers that are out there. And so ice ends up being something that we chase after. We look for nice light on ice. It's really fun to bang around in the boat. in the ice and see what we can find out there. Of course, the seals hang out on the ice. A lot of birds, the seabirds, they'll rest when they're not hunting. They'll rest out on the ice. So it's really fun. You really feel like you're just in the landscape when we're moving through these ice-filled straits. And then we run into some of these icebergs themselves. We like to call this architectural ice. And again, the colors, the structure, everything about it is just otherworldly. It really is. You get all sorts of dramatic landscapes depending on what the light is doing. If there's cloud cover or if there's a lot of sun, it can look everything from silvery to just sort of this glowing blue from the interior of the ice. Really just amazing landscape down there. And so even as we're moving from place to place and we don't have any particular event in mind, this is the landscape that we're moving through, which is still just extremely engaging, really fun for photography. And as we say, it's always worth driving around an iceberg. You never know what you're going to find when you're out there on the other side. Ice also comes in the form of glaciers. That 98% of ice that's on the continent is mostly glacial ice, of course, right? The zodiacs end up being a really fun way to get up a little closer to see the ice, to see it calving. Again, for the photographers, really for everyone's appreciation, but you end up with little scenes like this where you really, that blue that you only get in glacial ice really shows out. And for sort of impressionistic, artistic photographers, you can really come up with some wonderfully interesting things from this ice. Let's talk a little bit about our modes of travel. I mentioned zodiacking. So here we are on the Zodiac, and you can see there's three guests in here, and then plus me, of course. I would have been the other person in the boat. We have 2 Zodiacs on the Australis. So with only 7 guests, that means it's 3 or 4 people per Zodiac plus your guide. That gives plenty of room to bring camera equipment on board. We can move around. You know, it's no big deal for everybody to be on one side of the Zodiac together if that's where the wildlife is going. And so it makes us really nimble to be on there. The small Zodiacs are wonderful. They give us a lot of freedom for positioning ourselves. We can move around icebergs. We can move around with you know, seals and things that are in the water. We can move around for different photography angles with our small Zodiacs. So that makes it really fun. And we have 2 Zodiacs, and often what we'll do is the people that are a little more keen on photography, we'll put them in one Zodiac, and the people that are a little more keen to cruise around in a couple extra icebergs, we'll put them in another Zodiac. So we have a lot of flexibility when we're out on these activities. The other fun mode of transportation is the kayaks. The best thing about the kayaks is that you're the motor, and you're not really making all the noise. And so this makes animals really comfortable. We can't get as close as to ice and features that might be safety hazards with the kayaks just because we don't move as fast. So we tend to keep our distance from the big icebergs and things like that. But the big flat floating ice shelves and then, you know, cruising along the shore, where we'll find a lot of wildlife up along Gen 2 colonies, penguin colonies, those sort of things, with the Weddell seals, crab-eater seals on the ice. The kayaks are a great way to go and explore that, and it's a whole other perspective when you can just be in silence, you know. And again, so it's a great way to hear the seals singing or the wind blowing through the glacier. As it calves. There's a lot of avalanches that occur in the summertime as things are warming up. The big rock faces let go a lot of avalanches, and that also becomes really noticeable when you're on the kayaks. You can hear those at a distance and see some really large, you know, sort of landscape changing events down there that when you're just motoring around on the Zodiac, you may not hear over the engine, and you may not look behind you when it's happening. A quick word about the kayaking. You know, it's really for everyone. It's one thing that I have found that people have a little bit of anxiety over, but kayaking is really easy, especially these boats. You can see they're really big. They're as wide as a kayak gets. They're generally flat-bottomed. There's a little bit of a chine to them, but flat-bottomed. And the cockpits are really roomy. You can move your legs around inside there. The person in the back steers. The person in the front just has to paddle a little bit. So if you're, if you're a little worried about doing things with your hands and your feet, you can just ride up front. And so it ends up being a really fun, a really easy, beginner-friendly way to experience this landscape and create opportunities in a way that you can't really do even on the Zodiac. But with that said, some people do prefer to not be in the kayaks for one reason or another. One might be for photography. And if you're a more keen photographer with a lot of big lenses and you like to switch those out all the time, that's not as possible in the kayaks. And so in those cases, you're welcome to ride around in the Zodiac while we kayak, and we can always trail in a Zodiac at a distance where the kayaks can't hear the motors, but that the folks that don't want to be in the kayak can still experience the place in a way that's meaningful to them. So again, a lot of flexibility. And then of course all the gear comes along with us too, right? For you guys, it goes without saying. We have neoprene gloves and booties. You can see everybody wearing the Mustang suits here, which are floater suits, as well as insulation, dry bags, all that sort of stuff. We have all that for you on board. And then the final really special thing that we have going for us is our permits to camp out on the continent. And as I mentioned before, just to get on there, away from the boat, away from everything really, and just settle into the landscape is really amazing. Because of the permits, because we sustainable or responsible tourism, there is no eating food at all on Antarctica. And so when we're camping, what we do is we usually set up during the day when the winds are lighter, and then we go out for activities in the afternoon, the evening, we come back to Australis and we have our dinner, and then we'll pack up our clothes in our dry bag and we'll go back to our camp and spend the night. And the sunsets just last forever. It can be hours. Even in the middle of the season, it might get dark for only 1 or 2 hours in the night. If you're there in December, it won't really even get dark on you, even though the sun does, I guess, set. We're a little bit above the Arctic Circle. The sun does technically set. It never actually gets dark. The sun barely dips below the horizon. And so it's really fun to watch this sort of perpetual sunset and just perpetual alpenglow on all the glaciers and all the peaks. You get to feel those katabatic winds come down from the mountains, and it's not uncommon, since we're always camped near the shore, to have seals and penguins come and visit us when we're at camp as well. So really, really fun. Again, just another way to get your finger on the pulse of Antarctica and really experience it to its fullest. Most groups end up camping one night, but we've had groups that have camped up to 3 nights. If people are really excited for it, it's really easy for us to do. So it comes down to people's personal preference. If one night is enough for you and you enjoyed it, some people really like it, and we can continue to create the opportunity for more camping for the people that are really enjoying being on the continent. Oh, and I have some other fun, quick slides just to show you. These are just a couple of the camps that we use when we're tenting, just to give you an idea of what some of these locations look like when we're camping. Yeah, just stunning, absolutely stunning. So we're nearing the end. I thought I'd throw up a few other slides just in general to show you what you might expect down there. Of course, there's a lot of seals. We have crab-eater seals, Weddell seals, Antarctic fur seals, and then the molting in the bottom right, elephant seals. You'll find them molting this time of year. They go through their catastrophic molt, so they come out of the water, they change their entire coat before they get back in the water, which is a really, really interesting adaptation those guys have. And of course, the mother of them all would be the leopard seal. And on most trips, we do have great luck seeing leopard seals. They are elusive. They tend to hang out on their own, very solitary animals, but we spend enough time, again, banging around in the ice out there. We're always actively looking for the silhouette of a leopard seal, and they're really special, just giant animals. The polar bears of the south is what they are. They fill the same ecological niche as the polar bears do up in the north. By eating other seals, they also eat penguins. And you can see the size of their head here, very reptilian, looking animals, and it's often just that long, sinuous reptilian shape that we're looking for out on the sea ice to identify them as leopard seals versus the other seals, and that's how we know it's worth a special trip over to an iceberg just to make sure. And of course, there's lots and lots and lots of penguins down there. There's 3 types of penguins. From the top right, you have a Gen 2. The below it is a Adelie, and then off to the left is a Chinstrap penguin. And we can get into colonies of thousands and thousands and thousands of birds. So again, it's nice when we get on these landings. They all have their own sort of guidelines per the IATO agreement, the tourism agreements for impact. But most of the places that we go to on the Antarctic sailing trip, because we can access so many of the smaller and also more remote, hard to access colonies that are in, say, for instance, shallow harbors where the cruise ships can't get to. We often can have free reign when we go in there, so you don't have to just stay with me as a group as we walk around, but everybody can spread out and walk around and sort of enjoy the penguins on your own time. Look for those personal interactions with them, as well as look for meaningful photographic opportunities as well. So really fun to be out there on the penguin colonies. And all this occurs on the Australis. This is the Australis. Again, your adventure coordinator in the office can tell you more about the amenities, but as a bigger picture sort of thing, the Australis is a motor sailor boat. We have 4 cabins for 8 people. The guide is in one of those. We have a big galley that can sit all 11 people on the boat at the same time. It's really, really roomy. We can do presentations in there about all sorts of aspects of the Antarctic, as well as just relax, enjoy each other's company. We put nice Argentine wines on board. We have a French chef on board that cooks dinners, according to the schedules that we prefer, depending on our activities. There's a barbecue out on the back. We have hot showers, flush toilets. All but one of the rooms has its own sink and mirror and all that kind of stuff as well on the inside. So really, really comfortable boat. It is a working boat, for those that are used to luxury, yachts and that sort of thing, like maybe yachts that show up at the yacht club. This is not one of those. This is a yacht in style, but it's a working boat, right? It has a 8mm thick steel hull for banging around in the ice out there. We have a railing that goes around the outer edge of the boat, so we can walk around up top and spend time up there. There's seating up on top. You actually don't need to wear life jackets up in there because it's all reinforced and at appropriate levels to where people can't fall over. So it's a working boat. We're there to get out there in the ice. We're in rugged remote anchorages, that sort of thing. But it's very, very well appointed. You'll find everything that you need there. NatHab, of course, has thought of everything. We have all of our little surprises that I won't ruin for you when you get on board. But there's a lot of nice personal touches. But yeah, everybody should realize at the same time that it's a small crew and that it's a working boat. I think that's really important. All part of the sort of expedition mentality that we have coming on the board. I think the level of customer service on the boat is really exceptional. Particularly for the Antarctic environment, but at the same time, you all will be members of the expedition team. There's times when we're going to be preparing dinghies or getting kayaking gear ready, and you can go get your own coffee. And this is our crew. I did want to introduce them to you because Magnus, the first mate, and Ben, our skipper, he's on the left. These guys are really integral to the whole expedition. They're laughing and smiling in this picture, and that's pretty much what they do the entire time. They're game for anything, and these are the guys that you want down there. Not only do they have decades of sailing experience in the Antarctic as well as the Arctic, they have that experience together. They just know what to expect. They're tight-knit. Everything goes really, really smoothly. And then for us, they're just always looking for opportunities, Ben's always got his eye to the weather, his ear to the radio, listening to what's going on with other vessels in the area. And, they're really not afraid to just turn 90 degrees and head in a different direction in order to create opportunities for us. And you know, they put in long days. They think really creatively, and they're just really fun guys to hang out with. Not to be underestimated. They're a real highlight of the trip. And then my last slide is you. I wanted to talk just for a minute about who you might be. You know, the guests on these Antarctic trips, similar to the rest of the NatHab expeditions labeled trips, they're much more active, they're much more adventurous, and they're lacking the detail and the itinerary that some of the other NatHab adventure trips you know, have. And that's a wonderful thing, right? Those are all big selling points, and again, goes through us being able to create these highlights. So you'll want to come on board with an adventurous attitude, right? Expedition style mentality, we call it, esprit de corps, right? You're going to want to be able to go with the flow. You're going to want to be comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen after lunch, because we're going to just see what's happening after lunch and then take advantage of what that opportunity might be. And it's not that we don't have any plan, like we generally know where we're going and what our time frames are and things like that, but it's more of the nuances of the places that we're actually in, like what we're going to do once we're there. So you'll want to be comfortable with that. You know, you'll want to be fit. You know, you want to be mobile. You want to be able to walk around on snow that's on a slope. You want to be able to get in and out of the Zodiacs. You want to be able to put those Mustang suits on and then do your boots up once you're in that big bulky suit. You know, that sort of stuff. But you don't have to be an endurance athlete by any stretch of the imagination. We're not going out there for, you know, hiking miles and miles. We're not kayaking miles and miles and miles and miles. We're going out there and we're using these active modes of adventuring to create those moments. It's not necessarily for the sake of it itself, like a triathlete might just go run a triathlon. We're more interested in the scenery that the triathlon takes place in. And so we're experiencing it that way. If you have other questions on the physicality of the trip, your adventure coordinators are great people to talk to about, you know, things that might be more particular to yourself. Yeah, the other thing that you'll want to consider is whether or not you're right for the small ship, small group sort of experience. The boat is certainly not claustrophobic. It's very big. In fact, sometimes it amazes me how big it is when I want to rally everybody to go kayaking. It might take me 5 minutes walking around the boat looking for people. You know, but with that said, you know, there's one bathroom for the 8 of us. The crew has their own quarters up top by the wheelhouse. They have a separate bathroom. So you'll want to be comfortable sharing a bathroom. Remembering, of course, that you have your own sinks and mirrors and things like that in your room. You know, you want to be somewhat independent. You probably want to be, you know, a social person. Dinners all take place together. But at the same time, you know, we can always find our own space. You know, introverts do just as well as extroverts on these trips, of course. And during our excursions and then up on deck, there's always plenty of time to find, you know, space for yourself as well. So. Just some considerations for you all. And Lee, I think that's all I have for the folks. Did you want to do some Q&A?
Yes, I'd love to. We've got a lot of questions here, and the most popular question today is about, it has to do with concerns about motion sickness and wondering how calm the water is in the area and what people should expect.
Yeah, great. So most people will bring some type of, you know, Dramamine or an ear patch. There's also, they seem to work really well, some oils that you can put behind your ear now as well that are a little less severe than some of the patches, and those seem to work really well for people. You know, the biggest concern for folks is usually the Drake Passage. I think is probably the elephant in the room here. And the Drake can be what's called the Drake Lake, or it could be the Drake Shake. You could get a combination of both. Like that's what we had on my last trip. The first day we got tossed around quite a bit, and then the next 2 days we were calm as calm could be, and we were all up on deck looking at birds. We had a sei whale come up, so some fun things like that. You know, we think about the seasickness, getting down to Antarctica is more of a rite of passage. You got to sort of get across the Drake one way or another in order to see it. But that's sort of what's nice about Antarctica. Like the Drake and the distance of it and the rough seas is what keeps a lot of people away. And if you're willing to, stick out a little bit of discomfort in your cabin for, for 2 days or so, then the rewards are just incredible. Once we're down on the peninsula, it tends to be a lot nicer. You can, on some of the longer runs going through the Lash Strait or the Bransford Straits, these are more wide open bodies of water that are linear and tend to channel the currents and the winds a little bit more. And so you can get a swell in there. So you're not really getting like tossed around like you do in the Drake, but you do sort of have that rocking side to side. And more often than not, we can counter that with the sails on our boat. And primarily, that's what we're doing that's why it's a motor sailor. The sails are more for stabilization rather than forward movement. And so when we have those sort of, rolling conditions, we'll put the sail up and it'll at least keep us from rolling to one side. And that really eases things a lot.
Okay, thank you. And a couple folks are asking about this. You did touch a little bit on the weather, but what time of year are these trips taking place, and what can you expect in terms of temperature?
Yeah, so these trips take place during the Antarctic summer. It's important to remember that even though it's in Antarctica and it looks wintry, it's sunny down there. So we may have a thin cloud cover, or you may have just bright blue skies when you're down there. It's not very common in the summer to have big storm systems move through, but it is possible. But that would be a more rare circumstance. Temperatures tend to fluctuate right around freezing in the Antarctic summer, and that's December, January, and a little bit into February is when our trips take place.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. Do you fly to the continent and then get off the boat? You talked about the Drake Passage again, concerns about that. So just once again, how do you get to the boat, and how does that routing all take place?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So there's two different itineraries, and again, you can get a lot more information from your adventure coordinators, but I'll give you the gist of it now. We have sail-fly itineraries, and we have fly-sail itineraries. And so what happens is that on the northern part of the peninsula are the South Shetland Islands, and King George Island is a big flat island that's up there, and there's a Chilean base, and they have an airstrip. And they allowed DAP Airlines to fly flights in and out according to the needs of some of the tour companies. And so NatHab takes advantage of those programs to where you don't have to sail across the Drake both ways, and that ends up still giving you the classic must-do experience of the Drake, but you don't have to do it twice, right? And that also saves you another 2 or 3 days that you can spend down on the peninsula. You don't have to actually sail back again. You can just fly away, and you spent that extra 2 or 3 days on the peninsula instead of going across the Drake a second time.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, what about the camping? It seems like it would be cold. Do you provide all the camping equipment?
Yeah, we do. So we have mountaineering, like expedition-worthy tents. So like these are the same tents that they put up at Everest Base Camp and Annapurna and all that. So we have those winter tents. They're 3-person tents, but we only put 2 people inside them. So they're plenty roomy. You guys can bring your photo bags, extra clothes, whatever you might have. We provide dry bags for everyone for all these shore landings. We also have big, thick, inflatable mattresses for everybody to be on, and they're rated with insulative value as well to protect against conduction to the ground. And then we have expedition-grade down sleeping bags for everyone, and a down liner that makes for a nice cozy sheet, but it also adds about another 10 degrees to your bag. So we provide all that for everybody. And
All
it's
right.
really fun. You know, I know not everybody camps all the time, or maybe you haven't camped since you were a kid. But the camping, it's really comfortable. Folks are surprised. It's great fun to get out there together, and you know we all pitch our tents, and sometimes it's windy and kind of silly. You know, it's really fun to just be out there. You're on the continent. You're doing something together. But then when things calm down at the end of the night, and you just have that stillness, and you know you're there and you're camped out on the edge of the ice, you know, with seals and penguins in the water, and you get to watch those sunsets and the alpenglow. It just there's just nothing like that. You know, it really is another just extremely unique way to experience that landscape. You really feel like you're immersed in the landscape. You're not just visiting. Like, you know, even when you're on the Australis, you know, you're visiting in this, you know, sort of warm little chamber. But when you're camping, your warm little chamber is in the midst of it all. You're on the continent. It's really special.
Yeah, it sounds like it's special. I mean, it really is truly once in a lifetime experience. So, I'm in. I'll go. Hey, the great big whale day that you mentioned.
Yeah.
How unusual was that? Is that something you could expect on every trip?
So this is a great question. So I'll say this. You know, humpback whales are something that we see very commonly down there. It's a highlight of the trip, and we actively seek them. And you know, it's not a guarantee, but you can almost guarantee you're going to see the whales when you're down there. Days like that are really special. And you probably won't have a day just like that, you know, and maybe you're not in a spot where the Weddell seals start to sing. Those are each happened on, you know, one of those is from it were sort of the big highlight from each of the trips that I guided this year. Next year you'll have your own highlights. It'll be something different than that. But the take-home message is that those sort of really incredible experiences are what we're all about on these trips. And even if it might not be that exact thing, you're going to have those just really incredible things that you're going to be talking at, you know, at cocktail parties for years to come. But unlike, you know, a lot of the trips where there's just very known itineraries, and you're going to go here, and it's going to be at this time, and then you're going to have lunch, and that's not what these trips are all about, you know. So we don't attempt to try to force things and recreate things that we've seen before. We like to go with the flow, feel the pulse of you know, what's happening down there, and then take advantage of what might be our own highlights, what will be our own highlights.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, let's see. So let me I'm going to combine one last question because I just realized we're getting close to the end of our hour together. We have photography questions here, wondering if it's geared towards photographers, and if so, what lenses would be most useful?
Sure, yeah. You know, NatHab, we offer photography-specific trips where you'll get you know, a seasoned photographer that is used to education, right? So they can really help people improve their skills. These Antarctica trips aren't specific photo trips, but all the NatHab guides are photographers, and we spend so much time with people in wildlife, in the settings, that we all have a lot of tricks up our sleeve. And as a bare minimum for any guide, you know, we know how to position you. We know what light you're looking for. We can help you anticipate what the wildlife is going to do to make sure that you're ready and you do have the right lenses on it. Any of the guides can do that. You know, some of us also happen to be photo guides, and we can take it a step further, but you can't necessarily count on that, and the guide assignments sometimes aren't made until a month or so before the trips, so we never know for sure.
Okay,
oh, and as far as your equipment is concerned, bring it. You know, bring it. You don't want to bog yourself down with too much, but having access to things on board the Australis is really useful. And then during the excursions, I suggest a smaller bag that you can bring just one or two lenses with, and that'll keep you nimble. It's easier to get in and out of the kayaks, easier to get in and out of the Zodiacs, move around the penguin colonies. You don't get all your stuff dirty. You know, but you still have access to that. So what you take on one excursion might be different than what you take on a different excursion, but it's good to have those things.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, well, I will stop there and turn it back over to you for closing comments.
Well, thanks, Lee, and thank you all for showing up today. I really do appreciate it. Talk with your adventure coordinators if you have any other questions about the trip. They'll be happy to help. And if you have any more specific questions that you think I could help with more specifically as the guide, feel free to pass those questions on through your adventure coordinators as well, and I can respond to you directly over email. But again, just to sum up, like this trip is really something unique. Everyone that shows up is blown away by the experience. It really feels like being on an adventure in the old days. You know, like Shackleton could just as easily be on the ship with us as we sail around and we try to figure out what's where and what's going on, what we want to do on any particular day, and who's going to make the seal hoosh. So come on down, join us. It's going to be great. And thanks for participating today.
Thank you so much, Colby, and my thanks as well to all of you for listening, and we will get the replay out to you by about this time tomorrow. And with that, we'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.